I have absolutely no problem with people organizing into groups, and that includes unions too. The problem that I have with it, though, is when you have the government employee union, which essentially ends up electing the people who they end up negotiating with in order to set wage and benefit rates. And I think we end up having a lot of, shall we say, hanky-panky that goes on. Everybody knows how the game is played, and, your SEIU, your AFSCME, or whatever it is, and you donate tons of money to liberal politicians. You get them elected, and then you negotiate with those same people. Hey, by the way, we brought you in here. You would love to give us big raises and big PERS and various other issues. Okay? There has been some pushback against that, and we're here to talk about it with Aaron Withe, who is the Oregon State Director of the Freedom Foundation. Aaron, it's good to have you back. Welcome to the show. Good morning.
Bill, thanks for having me on. Pleasure to be here.
Hey, tell us a little bit first about the Freedom Foundation. What is the mission?
Yeah, Freedom Foundation, we're a nonprofit. We're based on the West Coast. We operate in Washington, Oregon, and California. And our goal is to remove government unions' influence from the political cycle. We do that in a multitude of ways. Our two primary sources of this is we outreach to all government employees and tell them that they can leave their union. This comes after the Janus decision that was litigated through the U.S. Supreme Court last year, which gave all government employees the right to leave their union, stop paying union dues. So we relish that opportunity, and we now go and tell all of these employees through various ways that they can leave their union. And then we also litigate against the unions as well.
It appears to have been quite successful, that Janus decision. Aren't you saying here, I'm looking here in your latest release, that 20% of the SEIU 503 union members have stopped paying dues. Isn't that right?
Yeah, and that's straight from their own numbers that they disclosed to the Department of Labor. We actually believe that it's a little more at this point. Those numbers were relevant as of October. Mm-hmm. But yeah, we can say at least 20% of their membership have left since the Janus decision. So this bill that we're going to talk about in a little bit is really a response to the losses in membership that these government unions are finding after Janus.
So what is happening then apparently is that the state of Oregon wants to pass a bill, or at least to consider a bill, that would replace the money that the state employee unions have lost through people saying, hey, I don't want to pay for this anymore?
Yeah, you're exactly right. And this is exactly why there's a problem in politics today and with the union's influence. When you're a government union, you fund these politicians' campaigns, and they will agree to go into office and raise taxes and do whatever bidding that you want them to do. And this is a prime example of that. Bill is House Bill 2643, and you're right. It's a bill that's being introduced to have the state replace those union dues through taxpayer dollars for those people that have decided to leave their union.
Okay, so we've had this corrupt relationship in which we have public employee unions, and of course we're thinking of teachers' unions and so much more. They get together, they have a political action committee, and they end up electing their favorite politicians. Their favorite politicians then negotiate their wages and benefits. And so the Supreme Court then says, hey, you cannot be required to support these unions if you are, within this business. And so they go down. And so those same corrupt politicians now want to replace that money with taxpayer funding. So we would not only have taxpayer funded employee unions, employees rather, but the taxpayer would be then forced to pay the union dues too? Really?
Yeah, you can't make this up. It's a scheme that they've cooked up to try and keep themselves in power. And if you're a politician that's funded by them, it's in your best interest to do this because you want to rely on their funding next election cycle. That's what this is all about. The real scandal of it's off the back of the taxpayer. It's off the back of these public employees.
Wow. Okay. Is there anything in the legal world that says that taxpayers should be paying for the private organization fees of unionized employees? It just strikes me as very, very odd. Very odd.
Well, it's worse than that. The U.S. Supreme Court deemed that everything a government union does is inherently political. So it's not just funding a private entity anymore. It's actually funding a political entity. I can't talk much to our litigation strategy right now, but I can tell you we will litigate over the issue. I don't want to tip our hand before this thing is passed.
Sure.
We do anticipate it will pass, but we don't think the version that we currently see is going to be the one that does end up passing. We think there'll be some amendments made to it.
So you believe this House bill? And by the way, why don't you tell us a little about? Can you tell us anything about the person who actually sponsored this House Bill 2643, Representative Paul Withe of Eugene?
Yeah, to be honest with you, I don't know much about him. I know that he used to be a union organizer in the private sector a long time ago, but I don't know that much about him other than the fact that he was heavily funded by government unions this last election cycle to secure his win.
So we know who Representative Withe ends up working for. It's not for the people. He's working for the state employee unions.
Yeah, I mean, he's not the only example. Over 66% of our legislators in the Capitol this session are funded by government unions. And that means they go in with the agenda to taxate and regulate people because that's the union's agenda. And then they'll do their bidding when it comes to bills like this and other type of bills that will mean that the unions can continue to stay in power and fund their campaigns. It goes completely against Janus, which came through the U.S. Supreme Court, and it goes completely against their membership. They do not want to act like a private sector business that needs to earn the funding of their people that they represent. They just want to be able to secure that power and be able to fund politicians the way they have done for the past 30 years now in Oregon. Yeah,
that's all this is. It's just about the continuing securing of political power. Aaron Withe, once again, he's the Oregon State Director of the Freedom Foundation. Where's your website where people can find out more about your organization, Aaron? Because this is one of those, I mean, at first I almost thought you guys were kidding when you said that the state legislature is actually thinking about funding the missing dues that their employees don't actually want to pay for their unions anymore. But I want to make sure people stay up on this. I want to make sure people stay up on this fight with you.
Yeah, so I'd encourage everybody to go to our website, freedomfoundation.com. You can sign up for weekly emails and all that good stuff there. And also, if you're a public employee, we have a website to inform public employees about their rights when it comes to Janus. That website is optouttoday.com. Mm-hmm. And I'd encourage all public employees to look at that. Or if you're not a public employee, pass it on to a teacher or some other public employee that you may know.
I was wondering if you could help us understand something, too, because the Janus decision said that that unions can no longer forcibly make you pay what are agency fees. What are the differences between agency fees or perhaps other fees that might be part of being a unionized employee?
Sure. So the agency fee argument was that unions, you can opt out of your union, but you still have to continue to pay dues. Right. And those dues at that time would be equal to representation minus what the union does in political activity. So if they wrote a direct check to a politician from dues dollars, you'd be able to opt out of that portion of your union dues. Well, the issue with that is you're still supporting this organization that you may not want to support. So in Janus, the dispute, the claim was that everything a union does is inherently political. When you're bargaining with the state with taxpayer dollars and you're also funding the legislature, of course everything you do is inherently political. And you have a direct interest in taxes that are being raised because you directly profit from them. So that's kind of the backstory as to why Janus was decided the way it was. Is it's a First Amendment issue. You cannot force somebody with their dollars to support an organization.
So since we have public employee unions, which I don't think we should, I think inherently the system for something like that is going to be corrupt, unfortunately. I don't think there's any way to make that clean. Do you? I mean, maybe anytime you have people that can actually force you to pay them, which private people in the private sector cannot do. I cannot force my employer to pay me or pay me more just because I want to. I can quit if I want to do something like that, but I can't stick a gun in his or her belly to do this. So, what are your thinkings about that?
Yeah, I mean, it's a First Amendment issue, right? You can't force somebody to do something that they don't want to do. We believe that we should protect people's rights, public employees' rights, to be in a union or to not be in a union if they don't want to. There's still an issue that exists in that all public employees are forced to be on union negotiated contracts, and they do not have the ability to go and negotiate their own if they desire. So that would be the next step in what we want to achieve. We're still a ways away from that, I believe.
Okay.
But when it comes to public employees, we believe that they should have the freedom to pay dues or not. And we also take it one step further. If people want to bargain collectively and they want to be a part of a union, then that's okay. They have that choice, but they should not be forced to as a condition of employment.
Okay. As a condition of employment. So when you opt out right now, since SEIU 503 supposedly has lost 20% of its due payers, or at least the amount of money coming in there, are they still required to pay for the cost of negotiating a contract, or if you opt out, you're just not paying anything, period?
Yep, you're not paying any union dues. On average, SEIU and AFSCME and the OEA employees, they are paying around $1,100 a year in union dues. So for those people who are opting out, they've given themselves what I consider an $1,100 raise every year.
All right. Then what do you see then as the model moving forward if you get to the point where unions end up negotiating, but then members don't pay for the negotiating process? Where do you think that ends up leading us, though?
It's a forced ridership argument in that all public employees are forced to be on the union's contracts. I mean, these, quote, benefits that the unions provide to people, they're opinion-based, right? Because if you're a public employee and you do minimal work, and yet you have another employee working in the same desk, let's say they work in a state building, and you do double the work of somebody that has the same job as you don't get paid anything more than them. You get paid the same amount because of the union contract. We believe that public employees should have the ability, if they want to, go and negotiate their own contract.
Oh, okay. So in other words, the superior state worker, the superior teacher, as another example, instead of having to go with a collective union contract, then would be able to say, hey, I am a super mathematics teacher. I don't want $56,000 a year or whatever Medford 549C or Grants Pass School District 7 would offer. And for me, I want I want 85. You want someone of my talent and caliber teaching the kids, you're going to pay me more. So that's kind of how you see it playing out over the long run as Janus continues to chew its way through public employee unions, unless, of course, the state of Oregon ends up forcing the taxpayers to make up the difference, right?
Yeah, I mean, everybody, surely it's within the taxpayers' best interest to motivate public employees to work at the highest level.
Sure.
That's not what a union contract does. It motivates people based on longevity. So it motivates you to be a public employee for life rather than actually work hard during that time, which is what we want all public employees to be doing, and I'm sure a lot of them are. But you want that to be instilled in them so that they have the ability to go and negotiate better wages, better benefits, if they can achieve those.
Yeah, it's always been my concern that as it is right now, the current union contract is about, all right, it really ends up protecting the inferior worker more so than rewarding the superior. Can we agree on that?
Yeah, it brings the bottom 50% up to the middle ground, and it brings the upper 50% down to the middle ground.
So why would you want to do more than just a middle-of-the-road job, right? Because you're going to get middle-of-the-road pay, ultimately. Yeah,
exactly right, exactly right.
Okay, all right. Aaron, appreciate the take. Thanks for the update. And if you end up filing suits against this, if 2603 passes, which in this state, who knows, anything can happen, which means it'll probably pass. We'll be back in touch because I'm sure the lawsuits will fly then. Thank you so much for calling in from the Freedom Foundation. FreedomFoundation.com, that's the website again?
Yeah, Freedom Foundation.
All right, great. Good talk. Thanks, Aaron. It's 7:20.